Okay, rounding out the tools here. Just going to show the difference between a pencil or brush tool. If I click on the brush tool and I'm going to set the hardness at 0%, see there's a soft edge. If I change that to 100%, I get a solid red dot. The pencil tool is very similar. The only thing is, even though you have a hardness slider here, so I'll use pencil tool, you'll notice it's a hard edge regardless of what they set the hardness at. So I'll just zoom in on that so you can see it. Okay, and it's a little more rigid along the edges. This is the brush tool on the top with 100% hardness, zero hardness. This is pencil tool. It's the same no matter what you do. So it's similar to a brush, but it just keeps a more rigid edge. The other tools on here that we want to look at is the color replacement tool. And this does exactly what you think it would do with a name like that. You can replace colors. So I'm just going to click on the yellow here, and the first click you make sets the color to be changed, and the foreground color is what it's going to try and change it to. It sometimes works really well. Sometimes it has some differences. If you'll notice, this is going pinkish in color. I only have a tolerance of 7%, so this is a lot like the bucket fill. If I crank the tolerance up, it reaches more of the colors, but it also starts to bleed a bit. You can do find edges, contiguous, discontiguous. These are just ways of determining the spread of the replaced color. So obviously for this bit, when I'm going to use find edges, so I don't bleed into the white too much. And I can just go through there and paint away. And it has its moments where it's an excellent choice for a tool. I'm personally fond of masking, but you might find it has its uses. That's the color replacement tool. And then the mixer brush. Not a huge fan of the mixer brush yet. I haven't really determined how it's going to be used most appropriately. I'm just going to choose a different color here so you can see it. So I'm going to look at, let's zoom into the tree for a minute here. So if I have my mixer brush, you notice there's a wet setting, a load, mix. I always liken this to kind of like fingerprint or painting. So I'm just going to apply that on there. And because I have a mix that's at 99%, it's applying very little of the foreground color cyan here. If I change that down to say 9% and I move over a little bit, you can see it applies a bit more of it. So it's kind of putting a nice layer on top of the image that we can kind of see. So it's a bit of a control of opacity and color. And then it's just a matter of playing with the different mixtures to see what you like and how fast it comes out. If you're just trying to put a little hue on it, maybe you want to do that. So another interesting tool. I'm sure with more practice it could be very valuable for what I do, though. I've yet to find the perfect match for the mixer brush tool, but I think as the more I explore it, I might find a couple of good uses in the touch-ups area, especially in portrait touch-ups. So that's the last couple tools for brushes, and we'll go over one more here, maybe two. Pattern stamp, a lot like the clone stamp. It's just going to apply the pattern. You can see that pattern right there. That's sampled here. I don't have a whole lot of patterns loaded, so I could apply the rainbow or this other one here, and then you can just paint it in. So another interesting tool. I'm sure if you had more patterns to play with, it would be a lot more effective tool. And the history brush we're going to try next week. Just a quick overview. The history brush just takes us back to a point in history, and we can set that point anywhere on these little sides here if we want. If you don't want to put anything in there, it'll just take you right back to the beginning, and you can kind of work from there. So I'm going to put a little history marker here, and you'll notice it just erases everything I've added. So that's one way of undoing brush strokes without using the eraser, because you're not actually changing the image, you're just moving backwards along the palette. So it's a good way of doing or touching up some things. Let's just take a look at this pink area up here, and I'll show you what I mean. So you can see how there's a bit of a bleed on this white. So if I make my history brush smaller, I can paint that away and clean it up. So it's kind of like an eraser, but all it's doing is it's returning me back to this state here, or what the picture was at in this state. And you can undo some of your typing or your coloring. And I think that's about it. Oh, let's do one more. We've got eraser tools here, why not? So I am going to choose the magic eraser tool, and the magic eraser tool is a lot like the brush tool. So you'll notice it has tolerance. So if I click on the sky, it just gets rid of the sky completely. Okay, now the problem is that white band around the rooftop was very similar in color, so it's managed to grab that at the same time. So I might want to turn my tolerance down, try it again. Okay, so now my tolerance is too low, it's only grabbing parts of it, and then go from there. So a magic eraser pretty much is just the opposite of bucket fill. And background eraser, if I bring up my layers palette, you'll notice, well, I'm not on a background. Let me just redo that here. History, go right back to the very beginning and open my layers. Now you'll see it's a background. And normally some things don't apply on the background. Okay, but this one is. Of course, just to prove me wrong. So background eraser tool. Again, it's kind of like a healing brush tool. It's going to sample as it erases. It has the ability to find edges. I haven't really got this one figured out yet. I'm going to take a bit more time to play with it, but again, it's another type of eraser tool, but it's a smart eraser tool. You'll notice I'm going over the edges there, but it's picking off just the inside. So if I try and get this triangle, you know, it can find the edges and stay within it, versus the actual eraser tool, which would eliminate everything regardless of whether there's an edge there or not. You'll notice there is a little bit of the image left over. That's partly because of the different modes we use with that background eraser tool. So the tolerance is at 24%. I can turn that up. So if we want to try and get rid of this red, you'll notice that's a quick way to get rid of the red, and I'm left with just the white. And zoom in a little bit. You can see there's a little bit of a pink in there left over. Let's switch back to regular eraser and see what happens. Oh, it looks like it's got most of it. So just a couple more tools to play with. Don't be scared to change these settings and see what happens. Really, you can always undo it and use your history tools to get anything that you really mess up back in order. And start with some images that it doesn't matter if you mess them up, because that's kind of the fun of Photoshop, is just playing. Good luck.